afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Neil Ritchie. By day, I'm a senior advisor to an organization in Minnesota, Main Street Project, and I'm an Alliance for Aviation Across America board member since the beginning. The Alliance was formed in 2007 as a nonprofit coalition specifically to support the interests of general aviation community around a range of policy issues. And today, the Alliance has over 7,000 members that range from individuals and businesses, agricultural groups, airports, elected officials, charitable organizations, leading businesses and aviation groups. A lot of representatives here today. So we're here together today as community leaders and advocates to highlight general aviation's investments in sustainable fuel and technologies, the importance of advanced air mobility to aviation's future, as well as the investments the industry is making in its own workforce. Leading companies, industry groups have all made significant commitments in sustainability. Business aviation leaders are creating an accreditation program to help the industry move towards more sustainable flight operation. The Sustainable Flight Department Accreditation Program provides the opportunity for flight departments and others to demonstrate leadership by meeting flight operations, ground support, and infrastructure requirements. On sustainable fuels, general aviation industry groups have formed the Business Aviation SAF Coalition, Sustainable Aviation Fuel Coalition. Includes now Canadian Business Aviation Association, Commercially Alternative Aviation Fuels Initiative, General Aviation Manufacturers Association, Helicopters Association International, National Air Transport Association, International Business Aviation Council, and the National Business Aviation Association. And a new program to support the expansion of sustainable fuels, the book and claim program. Under this program, the aviation operators can purchase sustainable aviation fuel at an airport where it's not offered by an FBO and still receive credit for its supply and use at another airport where it is available. For example, suppliers Avfuel, World Fuel Services have set up programs along with FBO chains Atlantic, Avflight, Clay Lacy, Jet Aviation, and Signature. Advanced air mobility is an exciting new technology with potential to open up new air transport opportunities, moving people between and within urban and suburban and rural areas more efficiently. There's a lot of energy and goodwill flowing in this direction towards sustainability, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today and thank this amazing panel. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Sam Mintz, who by day covers transportation issues for Politico. Take it away, Sam.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here with all of you and having this conversation. I will give you just a really brief sort of overview of some of these issues and how they're operating in DC right now. You know, that's where I'm based. I know you are all in various parts of the country, and we're going to talk about sort of more local and state and county level interests. But I wanted to just start with a really brief overview of sort of where some of these issues stand. So for years, but especially in just the last few months, there's been really a lot of momentum and talk and energy about how to boost the use of sustainable aviation fuel as a way of making flying, which is obviously a huge source of emissions, a greener endeavor and more environmentally friendly. The airlines have offered this big goal of making 2 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel available to aircraft operators by the year 2030. But that's a huge lift. The fuel is too expensive now for them to be able to sustain that. So they're looking for help from Congress. And there is a bill that I'm following, which is pretty interesting, from Congresswoman Brownley, which would create a tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel to make that greener fuel more affordable, which I know is of really great interest to general aviation operators as well, and to many of you who are focused on general aviation. And then, of course, we're also going to talk a little bit today about the policy around advanced air mobility, sort of this collection of new innovative aviation technologies that's very much still in its infancy and sort of is still a regulatory question more than anything, since it's such an emerging industry and the FAA is still trying to figure out how to address it. And then I know that there are also a lot of big questions in the GA community about advanced air mobility as well. So hopefully we can talk a little bit about that today and get some answers. So I'm going to just introduce our panel real quick. I'm going to let you know who's here with us, and then we'll start hearing from some of them and their perspectives from their various states and local governments. And then after that, we'll go to some questions, and we would encourage you guys to ask questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'd love to hear what you want to ask the panelists here. So we have Kansas Secretary of Transportation, Julie Lorenz, who's also chair of the AAAA Council on Aviation. We have Bill Holand, Commissioner of Arapahoe County, Colorado, and Vice Chair of the National Association of Counties Transportation Steering Subcommittee. We have Michael Alimo, the Director of Environmental and Energy Affairs at the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. We have Mayor Barbara Tolbert of Arlington, Washington. And then finally, we have Selena Shalad, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Aviation Across America. So I think we're going to kick it off with Secretary Lorenz, and we would love to hear from you about how you're approaching some of these issues in Kansas and what you might be looking towards when you're looking at federal policy and local policy and Congress.
Sure. Thanks, Sam, and thanks to the Alliance for Aviation Across America for inviting me today, and to AAAA for coordinating this partnership. The Alliance and AAAA's Council on Aviation and the SAO have a long history of working together, and one of our first efforts was in 2015 for the General Aviation Economic Impact Survey, and we're excited about this continuing partnership. I believe that one of the most important conversations that we're having in the transportation arena is around innovative transportation solutions, and particularly with an eye towards sustainability. And I appreciate the opportunity to hear from colleagues from other levels of government to talk about some policy issues. In the aviation arena, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, oversees all aspects of civil aviation in the U.S. and guides more than 43,000 aircraft through our nation's airspace every single day. For fiscal year 21, the FAA requested $17.5 billion to achieve its mission while making targeted investments in aviation safety, bringing new entrants into the national airspace, operationalizing next-gen technologies, making infrastructure investments, and more fully engaging communities on aircraft noise, as well as sustainability issues. General aviation sustains 1.2 million jobs and $247 billion in economic impact annually, and it helps communities access critical services like firefighting, law enforcement, emergency medical services, natural disaster relief, and a myriad of others. With over $20.6 billion of economic activity from aviation in Kansas alone, our elected officials are focused on the long-term viability of this important industry. We collectively believe that advanced air mobility represents a breakthrough in transportation that promises to both create jobs and make a positive impact in protecting our environment. Advanced air mobility refers to air transportation system that moves people and cargo between places using new aircraft designs that are integrated into existing airspace operations. And I think that's a theme that you're going to hear today, is sort of how do we take the new technologies and how do we bring them into our existing ecosystem so that they can operate in local, regional, intra-regional, rural, and urban environments. I'd like to thank earlier this year, Kansas Senator Jerry Moran, who co-sponsored the bipartisan Advanced Air Mobility Coordination and Leadership Act, along with Senator Sinema from Arizona, to establish an advanced air mobility interagency working group. And sometimes I think it's kind of easy to get caught up in all of the acronyms, but the purpose of this working group is to plan and coordinate efforts related to safety, infrastructure, physical security, cybersecurity, and certainly that's becoming a hotter topic, and federal investment necessary to bolster the AAM ecosystem in the United States. The bill was passed in the Senate in May 21. And while this was happening on the Senate side, Kansas Representative Sharice Davids introduced the same bill in the House as a co-sponsor with Representative Graves from Louisiana. AAAA, NASAO, GAMA, and NBAA, and many other prominent aviation stakeholders are enthusiastic about how this bill will bring important infrastructure stakeholders to the table as we work to field emerging aviation technologies. And I think that's another theme you're going to hear today, about bringing stakeholders together to bring technology forward. Federal and local support for investment in AAM, as well as sustainability and aviation workforce, is critical now more than ever as Congress and the administration debate infrastructure. As you all probably know, there was a $25 million annual authorization for a competitive DOT grant program that would support planning and capital costs for AAM infrastructure. State, local, and tribal governments, including U.S. territories and transit agencies, port authorities, and others would be eligible to apply for grant funds. Now, Sam in particular asked us to provide some thoughts on local impacts. So I'm glad to be participating today from the Wichita Chamber of Commerce. Wichita, Kansas is home to the largest industrial complex for manufacturing general aviation aircraft in the world. Aerospace manufacturing in Kansas supports more than 47,000 well-paying jobs and is postured for significant growth as we work with manufacturers to provide skilled workforce to design, engineer, and manufacture new aircraft like the ones we're talking about today. Avfuel began working with the Salina Airport, just a little north up here in Kansas, in 2019 to be one of the first in the country to deliver sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, to transient business jets traveling to the NBAA's Association's 2019 conference. Bombardier Business Aviation became the first business jet manufacturer to release an Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, for its global 7,500 aircraft and has been using SAF in its demonstration flights since 2017. And it offers SAF for delivery of aircraft. Bombardier employs about 1,200 people in Wichita. In September 2020, so right during COVID, in conjunction with the virtual 2020 Business Aviation Sustainability Summit, Textron Aviation, based in Wichita, Kansas, announced that it would offer SAF on all new delivered aircraft. Textron aircraft employs about 9,000 employees. Federally funded airports in Kansas support more than $9 billion of economic activity annually, with more than 33,000 jobs and an overall payroll of more than $1.8 billion. So never in our history, not in Kansas or across the country, never have there been so many corporate, academic, state, and federal agencies united behind the safe integration of new entrants into the national airspace. Our Kansas team is serving side by side with those of you to field new technologies that transcend current regulatory challenges and to elevate this industry for generations to come. I say this all the time, transportation really is a team sport, and there couldn't be a better time to be in transportation than right now. So with that, Sam, I'll kick it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary. We're going to go next to Commissioner Bill Holen from Arapahoe County, Colorado, who's going to talk to us a little bit about sustainable aviation fuel, its projected growth, and what sort of policies might help incentivize its use, and give some examples of companies in Colorado who are working on this.
Thank you, Sam. It's an honor to be here with the clear message that the Secretary suggests, and that is the need for a strong collaboration throughout the industry to begin to solve some of the problems related to aircraft fuel and sustainable and moving towards a more sustainable low carbon synthetic fuel. It's important to note that aviation, in spite of the impact that the current medical emergency is on the upswing in Colorado. Last month, as the member of the airport authority at Centennial Airport, in 1 month we pumped over 800,000 gallons of jet fuel in that 1 month. And so it's a growing concern. The consumption of jet fuel creates many problems, and the noise associated with general aviation is another classic issue that I'm sure that the Secretary is aware of. It's important to understand that SAF fuel is blended with commercial jet fuel, and the drop-in fuel does not require any redesign of engines or aircraft. The general aviation industry and companies have made critical investments in SAF and other sustainable aviation fuels that are less pollutant and more sustainable. The Made in American Tax Act, part of Biden's administration infrastructure package, the American Jobs Plan, includes performance-based SAF blends tax credit, enabling the decarbonization of key portions of the U.S. transportation sector. The essence is we need cleaner and more sustainable aviation fuels. Under the proposal, the aviation fuel that achieves a 50% or greater reduction in life cycle GHGs emissions as compared to conventional jet fuel, which would be eligible to receive tax credits ranging from $1.5 per gallon up to $2 a gallon for fuels that achieve 100% GHG emission reduction. The SAF is available in our state, in Colorado, at Telluride Regional Airport and Aspen-Pitkin County airports in Colorado, and many more, including Boeing Field in Seattle, Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles, Piedmont Triad International Airport in North Carolina, and Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport in Florida, as well as many others across the United States and around the world. One of the chief major SAF companies, Gevo, is based here in Colorado, in Englewood, Colorado. The sustainability of aviation fuel market size is projected to grow from an estimated $66 million in 2020 to $15.3 billion by 2030, a great achievement. The other important aspect that we're very supportive here in Colorado is the movement towards electric aircraft. Aviation, which is based in Englewood, Colorado at Centennial Airport, is developing an all-electric two-seat E-Flyer 2 general aviation aircraft, which is currently under review for certification by the FAA, and an 8-seat all-electric E-Flyer. One of this is in cooperation with the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado, which has a tremendous operation in looking at reducing the weight and improving the sustainability of batteries for transportation use. In Colorado, groups like the Colorado Hospital Association, Angel Flight West, and many other operators have been a part of an effort to deliver PPE across Colorado. I participated in several of those flights, bringing important medical supplies to across the state during the COVID issue. The airports in Colorado support nearly $48.6 billion in economic annually, and more than 345,000 jobs, and total payroll of more than $16.2 billion. And I think it's important to understand that through collaboration, we need to begin to address the problem of sustainability in aviation fuels. We're faced right here in Colorado and nationally. The airlines are really suffering from a lack of trained personnel, and one of the major problems that we experience at Arapahoe County Airport, where we have about 5 flight schools, is the issue of noise pollution. And moving to the future of being able to providing sustainable flight battery operated aircraft for primary training would be a significant advance as Aerospace has started in reducing noise pollution, as well as reducing fuel costs, which is the major part of training costs for pilots. So I'm very enthusiastic about what the future holds. We need to continue to get federal, state, and local collaboration in these efforts to allow a more sustainable and less polluting fuels and in the operation of our aircraft. Thank you.
I think that I've gotten a message that Sam maybe, I just jinxed us by saying we weren't having any technical difficulties. And I think poor Sam's internet just went down for a little bit. So at the moment, I'm just going to jump in for a moment while he tries to get back on and introduce Mike Alamo with the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And if you, Mike, want to say a few words, and then we'll kind of keep moving through, and hopefully Sam will be back on.
Great. Yeah, absolutely, Selena. Thanks so much. My name is Michael Limo. I'm the Director of Energy and Environmental Affairs for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. Here today to talk about advanced air mobility and new air transportation opportunities in Michigan and beyond, and the importance of those technologies from an economic development standpoint, workforce standpoint, and a sustainability standpoint. Advanced air mobility represents an exciting new technology that has the potential to open new air transportation opportunities that move, people between urban, suburban, and rural areas more efficiently. We do believe that the federal and state governments have an important role to play to support the construction and build out of AAM. It's essential for the benefits of this technology to be realized by that added support. Examples of that: vertical takeoff and landing aircraft used for AAM are also largely electric. They can operate and complete trips in close proximity to where they begin. So this can really help improve mobility for those with disabilities. The aircraft are extremely quiet and have the potential to alleviate noise, particularly in urban settings, and reduce surface congestion in traffic. Workers will benefit from shorter commute times, and the public and our planet will benefit from a reduction in GHG emissions. So there's some really great economic development benefits behind AAM that I want to speak to. By 2035, the AAM market in the United States is expected to reach $115 billion per year and support more than 280,000 high-paying jobs and contribute $8 billion in tax revenue. With tens of thousands of pilots and technicians and cabin crew reaching retirement age in the next decade, the U.S. is facing an unprecedented shortage of aviation personnel. Over the next 20 years, the aviation industry in North America will require 208,000 new pilots and 192,000 new technicians to meet the growing demand for travel and tourism. Stakeholders within the aviation industry, and specifically general aviation, are working with local airports and aspiring pilots to pave the way for the next generation of aviators. Workforce development is also both a benefit and a challenge that needs to be addressed in supporting AAM. So, youth engagement and STEM education programs are more important than ever to cultivate an interest in aviation among younger people. The federal government and state governments as well can help to support the aviation workforce pipeline, honestly, by simply bringing more attention to the career opportunities that exist in the aviation sector. Recently, we have a bill, Representative Rick Larson from Washington introduced HR 3310, the Promoting Service and Transportation Act. And Michigan's own Senator Gary Peters introduced its counterpart bill, S1681, in the U.S. Senate. The bill would authorize the Department of Transportation to create public service announcements in broadcast, print, and digital media to promote career opportunities and improve diversity in our nation's transportation workforce, including aviation. The resulting greater awareness of career opportunities will provide tools to successfully recruit the next generation transportation workforce. We've seen other bills introduced by Senator James Inhofe from Oklahoma. Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois recently introduced the National Center for the Advancement of Aviation Act of 2021. This would establish the National Center for the Advancement of Aviation as a federally chartered entity to serve as a national independent forum. The center would facilitate collaboration and cooperation between aviation and aerospace stakeholders for the purpose of supporting and promoting civil and military aviation and aerospace in order to address the demands and the challenges associated with ensuring a safe and vibrant national aviation system. Here in Michigan, we truly want to be a leader in AAM and mobility writ large. Building up that ecosystem in our state. There's some really great Michigan companies doing work to advance and demonstrate these technologies. Fuel, a leading independent global supplier of aviation fuel and services, is headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Williams International recently completed a successful flight test using 100% sustainable aviation fuel in northern Michigan. Ford Motor Company and the University of Michigan teamed up to produce the first ever sustainability study of urban air mobility. And in fact, U of M also recently won first prize in the competition for their vertical flight technology research. General aviation airports in Michigan support over $5.2 billion in total economic output, more than 33,000 jobs, and $1.4 billion in labor income. Some other companies working in Michigan are Denso, which recently partnered with Honeywell in establishing an alliance focused on electric propulsion units to meet new aerospace needs, and Airspace Link Incorporated, a Detroit-based supplier of solutions designed to help state and local government agencies better plan for and manage the safe integration of drones into their community, supported the nation's first autonomous multimodal organ transplant transportation last week in Ohio. So some really exciting pilot programs and otherwise demonstrating the valuable services that advanced air mobility presents to Michigan and regionally. So with that, I will kick it back over to Sam, assuming he's back on. Yes, he is. Great.
I am. Sorry about that brief disruption. I had some internet issues. So next we are going to turn to Mayor Barbara Tolbert of Arlington, Washington. Mayor, you have your district in Congress is represented by Rick Larsen, who obviously is a name that I think everyone on this call knows. He's the chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee. He's very influential when it comes to aviation policy. What is that? Can you tell us about what that means for the area and for the town and for the district?
I will. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. It's been interesting having to have these meetings over Zoom, but I think the benefit is we can have people attend from a wider geographic distance. So I'm glad everyone's here. And I just wanted to start out with a couple of comments that I've experienced in my community about the importance of aviation and general aviation when we have natural disasters or when we're in a period like we are currently with the pandemic. And I've seen this a couple of times in my community, starting back in 2014, when we experienced the Oso mudslide that many of maybe you heard about, but our response, rescue, and recovery operations were handled out of our Arlington airport, our municipal airport in our city. And during the pandemic, we also had dozens of local pilots fly hundreds of pounds of medical supplies and PPE to remote locations to tribes across the state of Washington, who got the supplies there much quicker than they ever could have through ground transport. And then this month we'll be wrapping up a mass vaccination site on our airport that was able to vaccinate 4,000 people a day through a very easy drive-through system. So I just, in this time, it's probably important to acknowledge the role that pilots, general aviation, and our infrastructure plays in responding to things that happen to us. And thank you. I do also want to recognize Congressman Larsen, who calls Arlington, Washington his hometown, grew up here, played on the airport, went to school here. And as you acknowledged, chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee, Congressman Larsen has been a leader on these issues and a very long time supporter of aviation and airports of all sizes. And he recently introduced the legislation that Michael mentioned that will help us meet the workforce needs for the aviation industry into the future. And as everyone touched on, it's through collaboration and partnership, particularly with the federal government, which has a very important role in the development and the maturity of these technologies. Federal policy in support of these areas of investment, such as the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Blenders Tax Act, are very critical to the future. The aviation industry is making investments in sustainable aviation technologies and fuels. Many companies are developing electric, hybrid propulsion, and hydrogen fuel cell systems. Companies like ZeroAvia, Zunum, Aero, Ampar, Magnex, Wright Electric, Aviation, among many others, are developing electric and hydrogen-powered engines and aircraft, which support jobs and economic activity in local communities like mine, as well as reduce the environmental impact. So here are just a few examples from Arlington. Right here in my town at the Arlington Airport, The Israeli-based Aviation is developing Alice, which is a 9-passenger electric aircraft. Sustainable aviation fuel is available at Boeing Field, King County International Airport, as well as Seattle International Airport. Magnex, based in Redmond, Washington, and now in production in Everett, Washington, makes electric propulsion systems, and in May of last year powered the world's first flight of an all-electric passenger plane using a Cessna Grand Caravan. Boeing, which has locations in Everett and Renton, Washington, have committed to ensuring all its commercial aircraft will be certified for the use of 100% sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. Zunum Aero, based in Kirkland, was founded in 2013 and is building hybrid to electric aircraft to serve short-haul flights up to 1,500 miles. The Port of Seattle, which oversees the SeaTac Airport, has set up the goal to power every flight fueled at SeaTac Tacoma International Airport with at least 10% sustainable aviation fuel by 2028. And Northwest Advanced Biofuels, a Washington company, produces biofuel, including sustainable aircraft fuel from local woody biomass feedback. Airports in Washington contribute to more than $107 billion in business revenues to our state's economy every year. And we're really looking forward to partnerships to advance everybody into the future.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Tolbert. And last but certainly not least, we'll go back to Selena Shalad, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Aviation Across America.
Well, thank you, Sam. I appreciate it, and just appreciate you all taking the time to join. I think after listening to this, really, you all have said this better than I ever could, and that's really part and parcel to our mission, is really to partner with groups and leaders like all of you all to really highlight the benefits of general aviation, local airports to local communities. And so, we're just pleased and grateful for our partnerships with you all, and to groups like AAAA and NASAO and many others in the industry who kind of work to let us know about what they're doing. And I think this is just really critical to letting people know exactly how this is benefiting local communities and how it kind of ties into this need for collaboration and support. And to that end, I don't want to take a lot of time. Devin, who's more technologically savvy than I, has shared his screen here. And essentially, we're excited to launch a little micro page on our website. You can reach it through futureofaviation.org. And we are also kind of building on some pages onto our website. But again, the goal here really is, and Devin, if you want to kind of scroll down for us, is just to highlight, some of all of the great work that you all are doing, some of the advancements and growth of this technology and investments, and what it represents for current and potential future growth. And I think, oftentimes what we've learned through the Alliance is it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. And I think it really is sort of kind of these data points, but also really just these firsthand accounts that the mayor and commissioner and secretary and others have given us today. And so again, our goal really is just to try and raise awareness about all of the good work that local groups and individuals are doing to invest in this types of technology and these examples of how that can benefit local communities. And so, just appreciate this opportunity. Devin, if you want to maybe scroll down a little bit, I think we can see some of the testimonials here that we have listened to today. And if we go actually to our website, maybe we go to the sustainability page, we can just show folks real quick. Devin. Yeah, so if you scroll down here, there's some of the facts and figures that we kind of talked through today. And this is, again, both, you can link to this from the Future of Aviation website, little micro page that we have, as well as from our Alliance website. And what we've tried to do is just kind of, as we've heard from you all and others about, the kind of the good work that's going in local communities, tried, and even just different facts that we've collected from media and other reports about where sustainable fuel may be available. We've really tried to just kind of put this all here and collect it. And as you all know, as you may know from our work over the years, we have an economic impact survey that's an eternal work in progress. So it has economic impact information that is constantly being updated. And thanks to our local partners, the secretary and aviation directors, and many of our local airports who communicate with us, and many of our local leaders, we are able to kind of just try and keep that updated. And so as you kind of scroll down, you'll see that we have some of these firsthand accounts here. And then, Devin, I think maybe it would just be helpful to show folks the economic impact survey and just go through a couple of those pages. We'll be building this out over the coming weeks with additional information as we collect it, as well as additional, kind of firsthand accounts and videos and examples of local companies as we hear that feedback from all of you and others that we hear from around the country, and hoping that, this forum today really provides us another opportunity to kind of keep that dialogue going. So I don't want to certainly take up too much time. I know we're into our hour, and I'm sure we've got some good questions, but if you just look through a couple of these pages, you'll see we've been kind of amassing some of these great firsthand testimonials and statements that you all have provided for us. And maybe Devin will just show a few others. I think, of course, we have such a great geographic diversity here between Colorado and Texas and Michigan. So we'll just take a few moments here. I think we don't have Texas represented, but we do have some information on the Texas page, so we can kind of maybe show that one real quick. And encourage you all, please take a look through. I think, as I said, this is the beginning of a long dialogue, and there will be so much more that we're hopefully going to hear about and continue to talk with you about. And again, our goal is just to kind of continue to be able to put this here so everybody can kind of begin to understand, not only just as everyone here has echoed today, all the great local benefits that general aviation and local airports provide, but all the potential future growth that we can see at the local level through this technology and these investments. So thank you to you all and all of our partners for kind of helping to make this happen and taking time out of your busy day. And with that, I will actually turn it right back over to Sam, and we can hear any additional questions that might come up or anything that might have come up from participants.
Great. Let's just a reminder to use the Q&A function in Zoom to send across any questions that you all might have. We'd love to hear from you. I want to start with one of my own. I'm really interested to drill down a little more into AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, which we've been talking about. Here in DC, and as it's defined by the FAA and other agencies, it's a little bit vague and sometimes broad, and sometimes seems to serve as a catch-all for a number of different technologies. And so some of you touched on this, but I'm hoping that maybe some of you can talk a little bit more about some of the most interesting use cases for AAM and what it means in your towns or counties or states, and what some of the sort of sites and examples are that it really shines out as something that you're looking to for the future. And I was thinking maybe we could start with Secretary Lorenz and then go to anyone else who has thoughts on that.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. So when I think of AAM and specifically what it could do in a more rural state, and this is something we haven't talked a lot about, but air ambulance service, being able to connect. So in a really rural area, I mean, the concern is a cost per person barrier because we have low density. So AAM holds some promise or future so that perhaps you could move a person from the site of the accident directly to a hospital as opposed to having to go to an airport and then to the hospital. So that would be a specific potential example of expediting emergency medical service. Currently in Kansas, everyone is 30 minutes drive for 92% of our population to get air ambulance service. So while 92% is a good metric, we certainly aim higher than that because that leaves about 225,000 folks who are further than that from air ambulance service, which then you have a life flight to get to a hospital. So that I think is a really practical issue that we're hopeful AAM can help.
If anyone else wants to jump in, I'd love to hear one or two more of these sort of use cases or examples about AAM in your area.
I just say to my respective role, Sam, that particularly in Detroit, we're seeing this mobility ecosystem really built out. Our state economic development branch, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, has worked to develop some incubators like the landing zone and other types of things where mobility startups can come together and share ideas. We also have the Detroit Aerotropolis that is working right now around low altitude drone infrastructure. And, as you see the intersection of 5G, small cell technologies, smart city, IoT, that all of that advanced technology kind of coming together, low altitude drone technology is going to be really important to help build out the service end of mobility. I think, when we look at electrified supply chains, in Michigan, there's a lot of concern being a large manufacturing state of job displacement. And so where do those jobs go? How do we replace those jobs? So I think the service end of mobility is going to become increasingly important. And so I think there's some great work going on to address those concerns.
Great, thanks. Let's turn back to sustainable aviation fuel for a moment. We've been talking about a little bit today about some of the sort of commitments of businesses and some of these industry-led programs like book and claim and carbon offsets. Let's maybe start with Mayor Tolbert, and then we can have others chime in. How are the sort of aviation companies that you work with in your area engaging some of these fuels and technologies? What are they working on? What's most interesting to you? I know you shouted out a few companies. I'd love to hear more about sort of what they're doing.
Mostly what we're seeing in our area is the production and R&D into electric aircraft and the hydrogen fuel cells, which we're very excited about because it's going to help the carbon emission reduction in the area. We live in a very beautiful area of the country. And so keeping our environment pristine is way up there in our priority list. So as we've seen the development in clean energy led by our public utility districts, hydropower and things like that, we think it's bringing a real interest. Our state has a real interest in examining industries that want to look at, so they're compatible when they're looking at battery storage and some of the, again, the private industry has to leverage partnerships together to make this affordable, because moving into new technologies is an extremely expensive proposition for companies. And so we're looking at building these clusters where the industries can help each other move through that R&D. That's what we're currently seeing in our area.
I wanted to ask you a follow-up to that, which is I'm curious what kind of conversations you've had with constituents and residents and other people that you interact with in your role as mayor, and sort of like what they see as the effects of these kinds of technologies and innovation and research on the community and the area.
So probably depends on the age of the person I'm talking to. I'm going to start right out there. If they're under 25 years old, they're very excited about the impacts to the environment, that we're moving towards a more sustainable way of having and reducing carbon emissions. So really see that in the young population coming up in the youth council that I interact with. Because of the effects of the pandemic on commercial air travel and the aerospace industry and some of the challenges that Boeing aircraft has faced in the last year, people are really excited to see these new jobs coming to the community where we can translate skills from commercial aircraft building into these newer technologies. There's a really big overlap in the skill set. And we're, as elected leaders, excited that we can find opportunities to keep that workforce talent in the area. It's also been nice to see, particularly in my community, some of those large tiered aerospace suppliers to Boeing having new opportunities to produce work for their employees and bring them back to work. So the strength of the supply chain here is one of the things that helps make it an attractive place for these companies to land.
Great. I've got a question for Commissioner Holen. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, is not too far from your county, from your area. They've been working on advancing sustainable aviation fuel, alternative propulsion technologies like that. I'm curious how you see this sort of research and development and sort of collaboration between research institutions, universities, the industry, communities. How is that helping to drive innovation in this sustainable technology? Oh, I think you're still muted, Commissioner.
There we go. Yeah, NREL has been a leader internationally in alternative fuels, from solar to wind energy, and biofuels efforts are significant there, as well as as I mentioned earlier, the battery. They are one of the most collaborative of government labs. They bring in industry. A variety of different industries who are interested in sustainable fuels, as well as alternative energy. I was involved with them for many years when I worked as a aide to in the U.S. Senate, and really established helped write the enabling legislation that began the so-called SERI organization out there, so solar energy, which ultimately became a broader NREL program. And they have really provided tremendous innovations in a variety of energy efficient programs. And I think they've been working on sustainable fuel for several decades. So I think they'll play a key role in support of aviation's sustainable fuels. The problem always is the cost of production, and as we found with other forms of energy, alternative energy, those costs can be brought down significantly as we scale up those operations. But that's going to be the key factor, I think. As a member of the board of directors for Centennial Airport, we're very encouraged by Aviation and what they're doing. General aviation is always under threat because of noise and community concern, and by bringing in new technologies, we can significantly reduce those concerns in terms of noise pollution, and begin to fight to improve the pipeline of new pilots to meet the challenges of the future. We're seeing tremendous reductions in retirements that are going to impact the entire system, which is going to generate, from a technical standpoint, more innovations in aviation products.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I have another question for Secretary Lorenz. Obviously, aviation is in terms of policy and regulation, is a pretty centralized industry in terms of the federal government, the FAA having a pretty central role there. But I'm curious, when it comes to AAM and sort of trying to support AAM technology, what role is there for state and local government bodies and various other entities and organizations to try to, advance the technology and keep it safe?
Sure, it's a good question. And, I talk a lot about we're all stronger when we work together, and clearly that's a theme of this session. So absolutely, the federal government, safety and the integration role they have between state and local, and making sure we have a safe national system. But as a country, we can't afford to build all new infrastructure. And so I even led with saying, like, this integration of new technologies into the existing airspace and into existing operations, and evolution is what we need. And I believe strongly in, and I advocate for a strong federal role in foundational research and development, R&D. And I certainly have heard from the mayor and from others on this conversation, there is a role for the federal government. But the R&D's got to move from foundational and theoretical into the practical application. And as you see that move into the private sector, there's a need then to test technology in safe sorts of environments, both on the ground and in the air, if you will. And that happens at the state and local level. So for example, Kansas, we're working with the FAA to conduct beyond line of sight flight operations, and to make sure that we have, reliable communications, remote identification technologies, and onboard sensors to detect and avoid other aircraft. And it's those technologies, right, that then translate over and will enable the safe fielding of AAM aircraft. But I'd also speak to, like, the human element of all of this. So when you are facing a problem, there are technology answers, but there are also adaptive issues that need to be addressed. So it doesn't do you any good to have a new technology if people don't feel safe, don't want to use it. It even goes beyond just the idea of can we afford it. It's like, will somebody actually use it? And that's where I think particularly state and local governments can come in partnership with the private sector to do some education and outreach and provide, again, I heard, Bill, I think you were talking about some pilots, provide safe spaces for folks to get used to and comfortable with that technology. And I think, if you'd indulge me just one more second. So think about Tip O'Neill, and what did he teach us? He said, all politics is local. Well, I think he could have extended that just a little further and said, the delivery of infrastructure is mostly local, whether it's at the state or the city or the county level. And so we need to make sure we have this whole ecosystem of businesses and health services and an education pipeline that come together and can understand and then benefit from AAM. So it really is that whole ecosystem approach. So there absolutely is a role, I would say, for local government and state government, but don't forget the private sector as a true partner too. So that's my view.
As a native Bostonian, I'll always appreciate a Tip O'Neill reference. We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to send this last question over to Michael. I mentioned earlier some of the commitments from airlines, companies in the aviation space about decarbonization, using sustainable aviation fuel. We obviously have seen a lot of that in the automotive space as well, with some of these companies making these commitments. I'm curious, what federal and local governments can do to try to increase support for that and to support those companies, and then also sort of what kind of benefits those companies are going to be seeing out of those commitments.
Yeah, so decarbonization is really front and center in the discussion around sustainability and clean energy in Michigan right now. Governor Whitmer has set up the My Council on Climate Solutions, which will ultimately draft the My Healthy Climate Plan going into early 2022. And, the chamber is heavily engaged in this process because, you have I think so many opportunities out there. First off, to address, low-hanging fruit like energy efficiencies, like exploring electrification where it makes sense. But also, and as the Secretary Lorenz pointed out, leveraging existing infrastructure as well. I think it affects, the governor's goal is economy wide, so it affects all industries. It affects all, it affects state and local government as well. I think, getting the word out that companies, by and large, are trying to do the right thing. We have some great members who are working to achieve net zero carbon emissions, some as early as 2035, many by 2050. Certainly, as you pointed out, Sam, we've got the automakers that are, some of which are very ambitiously going to all electrified platforms by 2035. So there's a ton of investment going on in this space. And I think what everybody wants to see is the ROI. We want to see the ROI on the technology investment and the labor investment as well. So I think, being conscious of that, having really real discussions with diverse stakeholders is really key, because you can get out there with your cheerleader pom-poms all day and, talk about what you want to see or, kind of your panacea. But in order to get there, you have to talk about the challenges it represents and how you do so in a pragmatic way. So, we're all in on a clean energy future. We're all in on decarbonizing our economy. But how do we do so in a way that doesn't displace jobs? Carbon leakage comes up a lot. How do we do so in a way where a company doesn't go to Indiana or Ohio because it's simply less expensive to do so. So front and center for our conversations at the Michigan Chamber.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed getting to talk to you all. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'm going to turn this over to Selena to close us out here.
Thank you so much. Well, as I said, you all can say it better than me. And, I would just encourage you all to reach out to us, at any of us through our website All of our information is there. If there's any more information that we can provide, and as we kind of consistently work through this process of trying to hear from all of the local leaders and organizations such as those represented on this call, and try to raise awareness about all the good work that you all are doing. So I just thank you all for your time and look forward to working and moving forward in a collaborative way. So
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you
Everybody
all.
stay safe. Bye-bye.